people what power they would choose, most answers would be to fly. Well, it wasn't too far from reality when the first man actually thought it was possible. The idea of flying was mentioned during the ancient times in Greek mythology. A myth described told a story about a father and son whose name was Icarus. Icarus and his father were trapped and managed to create wings to escape by flying. Leonardo da Vinci in 1985 sketched a wing flapping device that was intended to fly. Though his sketches were never built, Leonardo had the same concept of creating wings to fly. On November 21, 1783, hot air balloons successfully flew, which was created by the Montgolfier brothers. George Cayley, a British engineer, created the first real glider in 1843. He was the first to distinguish the four aerodynamic forces of flight, those being flight weight, drag, thrust, and lift. This leads to 1903 when the Wright brothers sustained a controlled flight in a heavier-than-air flying machine. The Wright brothers were mechanically inclined young men who were inspired by the efforts of others. The brothers' father, Milton Wright, brought home a toy rubber band helicopter that unexpectedly flew to the roof. From then on, the Wright brothers were intrigued with the toy helicopter and attempted to create their own. The brothers expressed how this childhood toy activated their curiosity in flight. People didn't want to accept the Wright brothers' success because important scientists had already announced to the public how this idea was impossible. About 8 scientists claimed flying a machine heavier than air would never be a success because it was simply impractical and nonsense. On October 3, 1905, the Wright brothers flew 24 miles in 30 minutes. Yet the miracle of flight still failed to reach attention, nor did people accept the fact that flying a machine was possible. In 1907, a man named Lamb began to believe the Wright brothers truly took flight. After having dinner with the brothers, Lamb stated he had no doubt about the possibility of flying. He then agreed with his fellow French officers that the flying machine should be taken seriously. Word got back to the American War Department when Lamb posted news about European governments having an interest in airplanes for their military to use. The War Department finally took the Wright brothers seriously and furnished them a deal. In 1908, they offered a price of $25,000 if their plane met certain tests. As word got around, Sally's news story from New York decided to send men out to go secretly observe the Wright brothers at their camp. After several days of observing, they witnessed flights with both brothers in the machine, which was never seen before. After being astonished, the news reporters finally created a page headline about the Wright brothers' accomplishments. Neon had written in his paper, "There is no longer any ground for questioning the performances of these young men and their wonderful machine." People then began to accept the fact that flying was reality. A public demonstration was held for the Wright brothers to show off their plane to the community. Once the plane rose, the crowd gasped with complete surprise and were convinced that flying was indeed possible. During the time of the Industrial Revolution, the Wright brothers broke the controversial hurdle of flight transportation. The Wright brothers were not always brilliant and successful creators. In fact, they were once mischievous students that didn't graduate high school. The Wright brothers grew up in a medium to large family and lived in Dayton, Ohio. Their father, Milton Wright, was a newspaper reporter as well as a bishop that encouraged his sons to be more engaged in their personal interests. The brothers were always mesmerized with mechanics and flying, which eventually led to their successful creation. Both brothers dropped out of high school at the age 18 and decided to start a printing business in 1889. Bicycling had soon become popular in 1893, so the Wright brothers decided to open a bicycle repair shop, which soon became successful. With a lot of time on their hands, they decided to gather as much knowledge they could about aviation and aerodynamics. Orville and Wilbur were curious in other inventors and specifically interested in Otto Lilienthal and his glider designs. They conducted that creating a plane would require control and power to have a successful flight. They examined birds and gliders to perceive a good representation of what a successful wing structure would look like. The Wright brothers used a wing warping technique and a rudder to help assist the turn. They also used an elevator that was placed in front of the pilot to help with the maneuvering up and down. The Wright brothers always built small models of their creation to experiment before creating the real thing. When conducting a project like this, they always made sure notes were precisely taken to analyze what ideas worked and what didn't. The brothers successfully conducted the first powered control-driven airplane on December 17, 1903, and becoming successful businessmen signing contracts for airplanes in Europe and the United States. Unfortunately, the Wright brothers' mother, Susan Corner, passed away due to tuberculosis before she got the chance to witness her son's accomplishments. Catherine Wright, the sister of the Wright brothers, took over her mother's responsibilities around the house, which created a strong bond amongst the siblings. In 1912, Wilbur died of typhoid fever, and Orville was forced to take full responsibility of the Wright Company. Catherine got married in 1926, and because of her choice of husband, Orville cut off communication with her, but soon visited her in 1929 on her deathbed. On January 30th, 1948, Orville died of suffering from a heart attack a second time. Neither brothers ever got married. Were the Wright brothers really the first person to fly an airplane heavier than air? Many say they were, while others say they didn't. Richard William Pierce was a farmer from New Zealand who also performed pioneering aviation experiments. His plane consisted of modern tricycle landing gear that needed ramps and sliders to have a safe landing. Richard didn't realize the historical importance of what airplanes could bring, so he didn't bother to announce his creation of a flying machine or take any photographs either. In March 1904, Richard stated that he did not achieve flight before the Wright brothers, but other eyewitnesses still claim otherwise. No documents containing dates and information were written by Richard about his accomplishments. Therefore, the Wright brothers are historically the first men to accomplish such a thing.
Just one thing, you are definitely convinced that Richard Pierce flew before the Wright brothers did in America?
Oh, there's no arguing the point about it. He flew 9 months before them. Now hold on. What are they going to call it?
During World War I, airplanes were often used to spy on the enemies, but were soon built with machine guns and personal weapons. The advantages of planes in World War I was spying on enemies from above and getting quick transport from one place to another. They were able to observe the enemy's troop movements and create an attack plan. In the 1920s, some airplanes were primarily created to specifically transport cargo carriers. Planes will always be used for as long as we know. We are able to transport and receive goods from anywhere we like. The impact of airplanes in the 20th century is beyond measure. The Wright brothers helped establish an entirely new world, and they didn't even know it. We still use aircraft in the Army, which is now more advanced than ever. People are able to visit anywhere across the world. Without the creation of planes, we wouldn't have had the slightest idea about flying to space. Because of the Wright brothers, we are able to observe planes as a guide to create aircraft structures that will allow us to fly into space. Because of space exploration, we know more information about Earth and other planets. As our technology continues to advance, our knowledge begins to expand, allowing mankind to become smarter and more precious. Airplanes are extremely important to our society because we are able to transport cargo and people across the world in less than a day. In case of an emergency, aircraft can be sent with supplies remotely fast to any location. Airplanes can also restock our military when in need and transport hurt soldiers to receive help. We use airlines every day, and without them, our economy would go bad and quick transportation would be impossible once again. Planes are a big part of our lives and the world too. Without them, every individual would be affected in some way. So let's take advantage of this great opportunity and never forget anything is possible.